Hello and welcome back to the Outdoors Station for another podcast and video interview. Now I'd like to start this one off by asking you a serious question. Where do you go for good advice? Now I don't mean Facebook advice where you might pose what appears to be a simple question like, I'm climbing Ben Nevis for the first time, what do I need? To get perhaps 100 or more replies from strangers, some of whom may know what they're talking about, and probably many that don't. Advice that could possibly cost you your life. Now I mean quantifiable, technical and experienced advice from people you can rely on 100%. Those that talk the talk and have walked the walk. Long before going outdoors was something nice that you put on Instagram. Outdoor Gear Coach is an exciting and innovative new venture to enable everyone from outdoor fans and instructors to industry professionals to better understand and use outdoor gear and additionally appreciate where it all came from, what was invented first and by whom. Made up probably of some of the best known names in the outdoors industry, including Mike Parsons, 40-year history in outdoor industry, originator of the Carramore Mountain Marathon and the innovative lightweight OMM brand. Mary Rose, academic in textile innovation, textile historian specialist of 35 years. Alan Hinks, high altitude climber and the only Briton to complete all 14 8,000 metre peaks. Chris Townsend, long distance hiker, author of 20 outdoors books and TGO gear tester since 1991. Chuck Kuckler, MIT engineer and researcher. Marion Parsons, alpinist, Monroeist and first ascents in Russia to her name. These are the key players that go to make up the Outdoor Gear Coach. Now they've recently released a new book entitled Keeping Dry and Staying Warm, which covers every aspect of clothing advice and how to use it. I spoke earlier today with Mike to understand more about Outdoor Gear Coach and how it can benefit the novice and the more experienced outdoors user. Hi Mike, thanks very much for joining us on this rather chilly and cold January afternoon.
Well, thank you indeed for doing this, and I'm living here in the Lake District, and when it's good in Patterdale, it's very, very good. When it's bad, it's awful, but today is a super day.
Yeah. Have you still got snow on the hills?
We have indeed. In fact, we have snow on the ground.
Fantastic. Okay, lovely. Well, take it steady today because I know you're out driving to a meeting after this. So thanks very much for squeezing us in. This is fabulous. Right, now I've done my introduction onto the Outdoor Gear Coach and who's involved. But perhaps you'd just like to give a bit of a background to how it came about and obviously what the majority of your work is based upon at the moment.
Okay. After Mary and I concluded our teaching at the university, we had an innovation course that we led for 10 years, and then we also ran an annual one-day Innovation for Extremes conference for the outdoor brands and the retailers and so on, and lots of invited speakers. And when we finished all that, Mary then said, well, I've enjoyed working with you very much. What should we do next? And so we said, well, we'll continue with our sort of writing and publishing work. So eventually I was out with a climbing partner when we were down in Borrowdale on a wet day, and he decided we would do a climb in the wet. And it was an easy climb, but as we proceeded, the name emerged. And as we got to the top, I said, how does Outdoor Gear Coach sound? And he said, that's it, got it. So what we wanted is to be an independent voice using a lot of the historical information that we had and the technical information. Because there's no independent voices without realizing it increasingly now in the last few years. Everything has either a visible or a not so visible or sometimes invisible commercial bias to it.
Well, certainly, I think you, like me, will see countless questions on social media appearing from people who are out to do something for the first time. They quite fancy going into the outdoors and walking or climbing or whatever it may be. And they ask the question, I'm about to climb Scafell Pike for the first time. What do I need? Seems to be a very sort of common question. And like you imply, really, there's a lot of different independent people replying with independent and completely differing experiences, whereas the team that you've got together obviously have got years of very serious experience and can advise people accordingly. But are you aiming this to be for the consumer, the end consumer, or more for the retailer and the manufacturing network, so that they understand more about the equipment they're producing and so on?
We're looking at the broad outdoor community, whether it be consumers, from anywhere between consumers and brand managers and retailers and so on. At the moment, we have focused on doing a lot of research and getting making sure that we can answer key questions. And in fact, of the 30 or 40 talks we've jointly given, including training the BMC technical committee, which they requested, we've realised that the key way to go forward is understanding what people don't understand. So at the moment, we're at quite a high technical level, but going forward for the future, we are looking at producing shorter sessions, like half-hour sessions and so on. And as you can see, we've got, for example, 3-minute videos in places, which can give support to outdoor instructors and so on, outdoor leaders, if they want to give a quick swat up to themselves, so they can inform their clients that they're instructing.
Well, there's nobody else, as far as I understand it, offering this service or this advice as a body, is there?
No, absolutely not. And part of the reason is that we have done this out of our own pocket. Mary and I have forked out to get the whole thing set up and going. It's an absolute passion. So it's only in the last 6 months or so that we've been able to start to raise a small amount of revenue by running paid-for courses for outdoor leaders. These are CPD. Outdoor leaders are required to do, like any professionals, whether it's doctors or whatever, are required to do CPD, continued professional development. And so we've locked into that area, so that we also have people who are very knowledgeable about how to use products. Because one of the key things that isn't talked about, whether that's a magazine or whether it's tests of products and so on, you can do all the tests and all the comparisons on various products, but at the end of the day, it doesn't tell you how to keep dry or keep warm.
So you're looking at the complete range of the people involved in the outdoor industry, aren't you? You're not just looking at the consumers. You're starting right at the beginning, where we've got product designers that are taking into account the technical fabrics, how the fabrics are then used, the design, the practical aspects of the design, right through to delivering the correct information to the consumer as well. Would I be right in saying that?
Yes, well, we haven't so far done any training to designers and so on, but because of my long-standing contacts in the trade, because I was formerly Carrymore, then OMM, then I still have a direct contact with several key people in the whole industry, brands and so on. So I can go through to fabric and garment brand people and ask them direct questions in a way that journalists don't have access to. So I keep myself in touch that way, and also all sorts of technical publications as well.
The book that you've launched, that you've brought out, obviously contains a wealth of information and actually goes back to, well, Everest times. I see there's we have Everest here on the screen. Do you want to tell us a bit more about the history that's contained within the book?
Yeah, this is the foundation of the passion, in fact. 20 odd years ago, I had a phone call out of the blue from a lady at Lancaster University who I'd never met before, and she said, could I help? She'd be given my name, and could I help by making myself available for an interview and helping her to contact people of my generation who had retired from the industry. And I said, yes, of course. 3 months later, we were emailing several times a day. So she said, would you like to be the co-author? And I said, well, I haven't written any book before. I've only done management memos. And she said, well, don't worry. I'm a good editor. And she was. And it became absolutely fascinating because of my contacts in Germany. I used to be the importer for Saleva crampons and so on. And sadly, 3 months ago, my good old friend Herman Huber, the Mr. Saleva, died, and I've written his obituary on the website and so on. But he gave me access to the whole of an understanding of what had happened in Germany. And so, as Brits, we tend not to recognise that other countries are good at climbing. And all of the methodology of climbing really came down through Germany. Not clothing, that was very UK and France, yeah, and so on. So we have written a full history. And in fact, online, we have a full timeline showing when every type of product, gear, garment was first produced alongside company startups and so on. Yeah, and then later, when we were writing the book, we were working with Mountain Heritage Trust, and the bits came back, and they were put on display after Tony Blair had opened the special exhibition showing the Mallory remains. And I said, oh, is there anything else? And they said, well, yes, there's 3 more boxes. So I had a look, and there was 3 we unscrewed the boxes, and underneath there was lots of layers of clothing, old fabric which had come off his body, interleaved with tissue. And as I raised the tissues and looked, the original blood of 70 years previously was still there. And I thought, this is very sad. I don't believe the old mythology that these layers were poor and stiff and inadequate and so on at all. So why don't we do something? So I called Mary and say, do you know anybody in the area of putting old textiles and carpets and all sorts of things back together? She said, as a matter of fact, I do. And so under the heading of Mountain Heritage Trust, we raised £30,000 and produced 6 layers, and they were brilliant. As I tried them on, as I got to layer 3 and I tried them on, and it was woven silk, which was the equivalent then, of course, of a nylon wind shell, yeah. Woven silk over wool into silk, and so on. As I started to put them on, I went click. Got it. I understand their layers because they're so much more flexible, even more flexible than modern stuff. It was all tailor-made, exactly so his layers fit. So it was brilliant. So that was a foundation for our passion. And we had a special launch day for those products. Quite amazing. There are two sets of those layers. One has been tested to 25,000 feet on Everest. And those two layers are stored at the Blencathra Centre, where Mountain Heritage Trust is based. And they're occasionally loaned out to people who want to display them or something. Climbers Shop, for example, ran a special display there. Yeah.
I remember seeing some of this in the outdoors press that you were launching this and the sort of revealing you did, but unfortunately I couldn't make it. But I understand from everything that's been reported, it was very light and flexible clothing. It wasn't the impression we have of really thick, heavy-duty woolens and so on. The whole layering system really was a work of art from their point of view.
Yeah. I mean, let's face it, there'd been so much experience of polar exploration by the early naval people trying to get across the Northwest Passage, and then having a go at Antarctica and so on and so on. So Burberry, which is now long since a fashion brand, Burberry had some brilliant woven outer textiles, which made excellent windproof, waterproof garments. And those were used by Nansen and Amundsen and everybody all around the world, yeah.
So what, in your book, I know you go into great detail onto the busting the three-layer myth, as it were. Would you like to just talk about the 3-layer and the 7-layer? Because I'm sure people would be interested in hearing about this.
Right, okay. That's quite a long subject, because maybe that's a subject for another podcast if you were happy to do that. But basically, we looked and said, well, where has this 3-layer concept come from? Because everybody today has rather more than 3 layers. And what we realized going back was it was probably a marketing statement for people who hadn't been outside before. They were saying basically what you need is a first layer, now called a base layer, and you need a woolly pulley in the middle, and then something to go over the top. And that's a marketing message. These are your 3 simple needs. But in actual fact, it doesn't work very well. Or to quote our colleague Chris Townsend, well, if that's all you got, you'll have to make do, but you're going to be rather uncomfortable. But he said, I wear up to 7 layers, yeah? And however, they all have to be correctly very well and accurately sized in order that they can do to fit over. And there's a very interesting comment coming from Chuck in the USA, and he was in store and he's saying one day, when I see people coming in, suddenly I realize that they're selecting a garment rather than a layer. And for a few minutes I was scratching my head and thinking, what's he talking about? And then the penny dropped. People are buying garments without any reference to what they're already wearing. And so if we look at the words here, say performance layering, well, layering is a word used now by the fashion industry. And there's a big, big difference between fashion layering and performance layering. And so fashion layering sets out to show your layers, and the under layers are showing at the front or showing below your top, and so on and so on. That's something to make things visually interesting. However, you can't wear garments like that. Otherwise, the wicking performance just will make sure you get very wet. And so the courses we run are now called performance layering. And first of all, we have to look at exploring the myths, busting the myths, if you like, busting the myths. And we call that myths, marketing, and misunderstandings. And then we get people to show people how, train people how to pick up a garment and understand what's there. And one day I was working with an Alpine Club group, and Sandy Allen, who is an experienced, incredibly experienced IFGM guide, and he also was awarded the Piolet d'Or for the Mazzino Ridge Nanga Parbat Traverse. He suddenly looked at me and said, "You know, Mike, I realise I can no longer pick up a garment and understand what it does for me." I said, "Wow, can I use that as a reference?" He said, "Sure, go ahead." And I realised that that was one of the fundamental problems we have, that everybody has, that the garments have changed such a lot, and there are such a wide-ranging difference in performance. So we've started from the beginning when we do the training, so we show people how to look at what we call the truth label. Never mind what the marketing label says on the front. Go inside, and there is a truth label which tells you which polymers are used there. That's a legal requirement by the WTO. Then we teach people what those 5 key polymers are about, and then there's thousands and thousands of different textiles, probably millions actually, but there's only 4 different categories, and so we teach people to recognize the 4 different ones, and each have a distinctly different function. So suddenly you're building up with those, you're building up a picture of how to pick up a garment and so on. And then we give a number, show people how to do a number of DIY tests, like windproofing tests and wicking tests, which you can even at a pinch do in a store with care. You can certainly do it on your existing garments, and that's what we show. Get people to we demonstrate those simple DIY tests.
Nice, nice. So you said there are lots of, 10, I think you've written in your notes, sort of common myths and misunderstandings about staying warm and layering systems. Do you want to share any of those with us now, that people might suddenly go, right, I understand?
Okay, well, the first one is about breathability. Yeah. So I always ask people the question, okay, well, what does this mean? Does that mean, do you think, that the fabric is air porous or air permeable? And usually around 75 people, with odd exceptions, say, well, yeah. But actually, in 95% of all cases, waterproof garments are not air permeable. So that's a first surprise for people. Is that a surprise for you? I'm sure you know that.
Yeah, I was aware of that one, certainly, but okay. I was just curious to see which ones you come up with.
And so that's a key one, but it also then provokes the thing, well, okay, well, how does this sweat get out then? And so we come then into the MVTR, moisture vapor transmission rate. Well, the moisture vapor is not transmitted because there are small micro holes. There are micro holes in the membranes that are used, but because of leakage when the garment is soiled, then those holes are blocked by a simple compound called hydrophilic polyurethane, hydrophilic PU. Now, if we go back 50 years, in the mid to late 70s, there were two inventions. One was Gore-Tex with their EPTFE, polytetrafluoroethylene, which was microporous. And the other one was produced after a research project by the UK Ministry of Defence, because they were wanting a fabric to supersede Ventar, which was invented during the war period for immersion suits. And so Gore-Tex is a combination of EPTFE and hydrophilic PU. Now, that's a surprise for people. So what happens next? How does it get out? It transmits as a moisture molecules, but it only goes out through your outer garment when the temperature, pressure, and humidity level inside the garment is greater than outside the garment. It's like an uphill, downhill situation. Yeah, water only flows downhill, usually anyway. And that moisture vapor will only goes out if there's that difference, yeah? And as soon as I say that, people go, oh, that's answering questions for us and verifying probably what we already know but didn't want to believe. So what do you do about that? Well, there is an answer that within the communities of practice, walkers almost never use a plain, thin, basic windshell. But we think that's probably one of the most important things coming up for the future. And the reason for that is that over the next 3 years, all of the fabrics, almost all of the fabrics used that we know and well and love or hate on garments will change. That's after 50 years of innovation. There's going to be a complete seismic change, and that change is being driven by sustainability, recyclability, the trials to eliminate effluents which are harmful to the environment, to the air, or to the seas, to the water, yeah, and also, of course, the big one, which is climate change, which is CO2 reduction. So that emphasizes the crux importance to be able to pick up a garment using our methodology and get a better idea of what it's going to do or not do, what you need. And so what is happening now already is that the DWR finish on garments, which is DWR on garments, is a simple finish called a durable water repellency. And that is also there on tent fabrics. It's on wind shells and so on and so on. But it's on waterproofs. And that is not exactly a barrier, but it's a first aid to preventing the water penetrating through the interstices in the fabric. But it's also, it makes the outer surface of your waterproof jacket soil resistant. Now, soil resistance is something that exists in all furnishings, carpets, seating, and on all car seating. But that DWR is a fluoro compound.
Right.
And that is deadly.
Mm.
And the last deliveries arrived in this last season. That's the last of it. So what people don't realise is that because it's not soil resistant, it will get dirtier quicker, and they will have to wash and care for the garments much more frequently. So there is also another answer to help you, and that's to wear a wind shell more frequently, unless it's really raining. But what you'll see is, I'm sure you notice this, most British walkers and so on, when they're there with the layers on, and as soon as it gets windy, they put the waterproof on. So they overheat, there's condensation occurring, and quite a high proportion of complaints to gore are probably because it's condensation and not leakage of the garment, yeah? So a good way to go for the future is to save your very expensive and critically important waterproof garment by using a wind shell.
Yeah, I have to say that when I first picked up a wind shell, first time I'd seen them was almost 20 years ago, and it's completely revolutionised our outdoor activities and certainly all of our friends, because they couldn't understand the benefits of it until they tried one, then realised, as you rightly say, they're not sweating and overheating with all the layers on, thinking that's what they need. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, let's just change the topic slightly from the layering to, well, it's still including the layering. Is insulation. What would you advise on people now? Because I say it is the coldest week, I think, of the year so far. And down insulation is the common one that people refer to as being the best insulation. But I think you question that also in the book.
I don't question down, no, but I ask the question to people, well, what is the best insulation? And the real key to understanding how to keep warm and dry is to understand that the best insulation is air, but dry air. And so all of the garments that we use and know, which are sort of in the area of being warm garments, are all methods of producing garments which hold air. So fleece, for example, holds a small amount of air. Base layers hold a very small, a much smaller amount of air, but they still hold air because it's a knitted fabric with loops. Right? Down insulated garments, which have either down or a non-woven textile, hold even more air, and they're quite thick. They can be 2, 3, 4, even 5 centimeters thick, according to the type of construction that's there. At the moment, they are very popular, very trendy, but people tend to use them as a mid-layer and put them on, but you will certainly quickly overheat. And they're best used as a top layer. And that's something that the climbing community has picked up. If we go back to the 90s, there was a guy called Mark Twight who wrote a book called Extreme Alpinism. and he was very critical of garment manufacturers and so on, and saying this layering thing, this layering method that they propose is ridiculous. You just can't be stopping on a climb and taking things off. So he said, look, what you have to do is to wear, when you are active, you wear just enough to keep you warm or keep you cool, yeah? And when you stop, in other words, on a belay, you put an over jacket on. And I was fortunate and perhaps privileged to talk to his partner, who's Andy Parkin, who is an artist in Chamonix, who was on that very climb with him, because they were taking about 3 hours per pitch on a very difficult climb. But climbing is an intermittent activity, and other activities and other people assume that they are moving continuously. Well, even walking, I would suggest that you need to stop for lunch sometime. You can go without. You can have a quick drink, and people tend to not eat so much, and people are in the pub by 6:30, typically in the UK scenarios, yeah. But nevertheless, the situation with eating is critically important, yeah, and people don't particularly associate eating with keeping warm. In actual fact, a key thing we teach is, and I noticed some comments. I've had a look at your website, and you've got some interesting comments in there as well, okay, which are very relevant. And so about a third of the calories we push down our neck are turned into glycogen, which propels our muscles, and the other 2/3 are converted into heat to keep us warm. So the heat is coming from our bodies, and what garments do is merely retain that in a number of different ways. Yeah. And knowing just how it saves it is a matter not only of the type of textile and the insulation materials, but it's also how you use them, and the construction of the garment, and the neck, and the sleeves, and the cuffs, and everything, and so on. Yeah.
Well, Mike, we're sort of running out of time now. I think you've obviously touched on a couple of points here, or a variety of points, to give people much more indication of exactly how much depth of knowledge is going to be found in the book. Now, people can find out more about you and obviously the Outdoor Gear Coach group, and also some of the sort of services you offer or contacts you offer on your website, which is outdoorgearcoach.co.uk. And if the book has whetted your appetite, our discussion on the book, that is available on Amazon, both as a hard or paperback and as a Kindle edition as well. And it is a very interesting and thought-provoking read, which, if you're keen on improving your performance outdoors and keeping comfortable, then obviously it is a good way to go to take that on board. So Mike, thank you very much indeed for your time this afternoon, and certainly I see the lights sort of changed in the background, so that it is starting to get dark where you are, and it's still fairly cold here. Is there anything further you'd just like to quickly add to the contents and where people can go? And the other question I did want to ask you actually is, are you able, or would you like to be contacted by walking groups or mountaineering groups to give talks? Is that something else that's in your portfolio?
Absolutely. People can contact me through the Through the website, I sometimes do plenty of voluntary talks of about 3/4 of an hour, which is enough, and so on. But the CPD courses we do are for professionals at the moment, yeah, and those are 6 hour, effectively a day, yeah. Because those are geared to really properly learning, so that those outdoor people or retail staff can pass that on further. Yeah, but I do talk from time to time on a freebie basis to clubs, and I've given frequent talks. Yeah, so yeah, please do contact me, and we have a Facebook website. Just look up Outdoor Gear Coach, yeah, and you can ask questions through that.
Excellent. Well, I'll put all the links to everything that we've discussed, the book, the websites, and the Facebook page on the show notes. So if you missed that during the conversation, folks, it will be in the show notes. So thanks very much indeed for your time, Mike, and look after yourself until next time we chat, or stuck on a boat crossing from Mallaig.
Thank you very much indeed, Bob, for this. That's most appreciated. Yeah. See you soon.
Well, my thanks to Mike for taking the time to share some of his knowledge and some of the details and things that you will find inside the book Keeping Warm and Staying Dry. Something that is obviously very important at this moment in time. One, with the cost of electricity and cost of fuel, keeping warm, and also the practicalities of keeping warm during these winter months. Of course, all the links to everything we discussed will be available in the show notes, so do pop over to theoutdoorstation.co.uk and you'll get links there. And while you're there, please join in our newsletter. I won't bombard you. I will certainly let you know every now and again what has been released. So I hope you found that of interest, folks. As I say, each week I am trying to keep a fairly diverse content range to keep everybody entertained and to also look at their enjoyment of the outdoors from a different angle. So until next time, folks, take care out there, stay warm, stay dry, and bye for now.